What if a town appeared on every map but existed in no government record? What if the people who lived there had no birth certificates, no identification, and no legal proof that they ever existed at all? What if travelers who stopped there overnight woke up somewhere completely different, with no memory of leaving? What if the town vanished completely every single morning, leaving nothing behind except cold ground and the faint smell of burning wood? And what if the one journalist who went there to expose the truth was found 3 weeks later, sitting in a field 200 miles away, completely silent, staring at nothing, whispering the same 4 words over and over again until the day she died? This is the documented, deeply disturbing story of a place that locals in rural Romania called Satul de Noapte, the night village. And once you understand what actually happens there, you will never look at darkness the same way again. It begins the way all truly terrifying things begin, quietly. A single road that branches off from a regional highway in the Carpathian mountain region of northern Romania. A road that appears on older Soviet-era maps but is completely absent from every modern GPS system and every satellite image taken after 1991. Locals who live near the highway know the road exists. They have seen it. Some of them have driven past the turnoff their entire lives, but not one person from the surrounding villages has ever voluntarily turned onto it after sunset. When journalists and researchers have asked why, the answers are always the same. Not fear exactly, something older than fear, something closer to the kind of deep instinctive refusal that stops an animal from walking into a trap it cannot yet see. The first documented outside account of the town came from a Hungarian cartographer named István Varga in 1974. He was updating regional maps for a government infrastructure project and drove the road during daylight hours to record its condition. What he found at the end of the road was an ordinary-looking village: stone houses, a central square, a well, a small church. He noted it in his survey log with no particular alarm and drove back to his base camp. When he returned the following morning to complete his measurements, he could not find the road. He drove the highway for 3 hours, certain he was losing his mind, before finally stopping and comparing his notes. His GPS coordinates from the previous day pointed to an open field, flat, empty, and completely undisturbed, as if no structure had ever stood there. He reported the incident to his supervisors. The report was filed under clerical error and closed within a week. István Varga spent the remaining 11 years of his career quietly collecting similar accounts from other surveyors, hikers, and truck drivers who had traveled that highway at night. He found 37 separate testimonies describing the same village, all from different decades, all from people who had no connection to each other. Every description was nearly identical: stone houses, a central square, a well, a small church, and people, ordinary-looking people who waved, who smiled, who invited travelers inside for warmth and food. But every single person who had entered a building inside the village reported the same experience afterward: a gap, a clean, precise, surgical gap in their memory that covered exactly the hours between midnight and dawn. They remembered arriving. They remembered the warmth of a fire, a meal, faces that seemed friendly and completely normal. And then they remembered standing outside in daylight, far from where they had been, with no car, no belongings, and no explanation for how they got there. Varga died in '85. His files were inherited by his daughter, a woman named Cătălin, in 2009. Andreea, a Romanian investigative journalist known for her fearless coverage of Cold War-era secrets and government cover-ups, read Varga's files in a single night. The next morning, she told Cătălin something that made Cătălin's blood run cold. She said the village was not a mystery. She said she had been there before. She just could not remember when. If this story is already crawling under your skin, you are not alone. Subscribe right now and stay with us, because what Andreea Constantin discovered next is the part that no Romanian media outlet would ever agree to publish, and the reason why will make complete sense before this is over. Andreea had no memory of visiting the village, but she had proof. buried inside a box of old field notes from a reporting trip she had taken in 2003 to cover a story about abandoned Soviet infrastructure in northern Romania. She found a single photograph she had no memory of taking. The photograph showed a stone building. Behind it, partially visible, was what appeared to be the edge of a church steeple. On the back of the photograph, in her own handwriting, she had written 2 words. She recognized her penmanship completely, but she had absolutely no memory of writing them. The 2 words were, "Do not come back." That warning, written by her own hand to herself, was the thing that should have stopped her. It did not. Andrea began her investigation methodically, the way she always worked. She cross-referenced Varga's testimonies with Romanian folklore databases and found something that the cartographer either missed or deliberately not included in his files. The region surrounding that highway had a pre-Christian oral tradition describing a concept that local historians translated roughly as the between place, a location that existed in the space between one day and the next, not quite in the world of the living, not quite in the world of the dead, a threshold. And according to the oldest versions of the tradition, the between place was not empty. It was inhabited by people who had made a specific kind of exchange. They had given up their connection to linear time in order to escape something, a plague, a war, a persecution. They had stepped sideways out of history at a moment of absolute crisis, and they had never been able to step back in. They were not ghosts, they were not monsters, they were survivors, trapped in a single night that never ended, repeating itself across centuries, sustained by something that the oldest oral accounts described only as the attention of those who passed through, which meant the travelers who stopped were not guests, they were fuel. Andrea published a preliminary article online in March 2011 outlining her research. The article received significant attention for approximately 6 hours before it was removed from the publication's website. Her editor told her the removal was a legal precaution due to unverified claims. Andrea knew her editor well enough to hear the fear underneath that explanation. She asked him directly what had happened. He told her that within 2 hours of publication, the outlet had received calls from 3 separate Romanian government offices she had never heard of, referencing a classification code that predated the modern Romanian state entirely. A Soviet-era code applied to a piece of journalism about a village that officially did not exist. That night, Andrea drove to the highway alone. She was found 22 days later, not on a road, not near the highway, but in a harvested cornfield in a different county entirely, sitting perfectly upright, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes open and fixed on something no one else could see. Her car was never found. Her recording equipment was never found. She was physically unharmed. She was not catatonic. She was aware of the people around her. She simply would not speak, except for those 4 words repeated in a low, steady voice with no variation in tone or emotion, over and over again. She said, "They are still waiting." Andrea Constantine was placed in a private care facility in Bucharest in 2011. She lived there for 7 more years. Staff members reported that she spoke those 4 words an average of several hundred times each day. She never explained them. She never elaborated. In her final weeks, she stopped speaking entirely. But the nurses who sat with her at night said that in the hours between midnight and dawn, she would turn her head slowly toward the window and stare at the dark with an expression that none of them could ever describe accurately, except to say it was not fear. It looked almost like recognition. The road still appears on Soviet-era maps. The field is still empty every morning, and somewhere in the darkness between one day and the next, something is apparently still waiting for the next traveler to turn off the highway and follow the light. So here is what I need you to think about tonight. If those trapped survivors have been waiting for centuries, trading their only resource across an endless repeating night just to keep existing, what exactly does that say about how far any of us would go to survive? And more importantly, If you were driving alone on a dark road and you saw warm lights in the distance and a village that should not be there, would you stop?